So, these 10 questions you need to ask your employer about your 401k plan could help you understand and strategize your retirement investments. Question number one: what brokerage company primarily manages your 401k? You'd be surprised to learn that some 401ks are managed by two brokers. My previous employer actually had Vanguard managing my core 401k, but they had TD Ameritrade managing my self-directed 401k. It was a weird scenario, but that's whom my employer had contracts with to have my 401k managed. And let me show you how a 401k generally works. Every employer that provides a 401k comes with a traditional 401k. It's going to be directly deducted from your gross income before you pay any federal or state income taxes. And when you retire, you're going to pay federal and state income taxes on the distributions. If your employer provides a match to your contribution, the money that comes directly from your employer goes to the traditional portion of your 401k, unless you elect to pay taxes now on the employer contribution, which will go to the Roth portion of the 401k. The Roth employer contribution is a new law that got passed in late 2022. If your employer offers the Roth 401k, then the contribution comes directly from your paycheck, but in after-tax dollars, which means that you'll pay federal and state income taxes now so that you don't pay any taxes later. And whether you do traditional 401k or Roth 401k, your contributions will go directly from your paychecks to the core investments. And that could be your target date retirement funds or other actively managed mutual funds. And some employers, like my previous employer, will offer what's called a 401k self-directed investment account for seasoned investors like me. The general rule is that you have to keep a minimum of 10% of your 401k in core investment, and you can invest up to 90% of your 401k in a self-directed investment. My core investments were managed by Vanguard, and my self-directed investment was managed by TD Ameritrade. What's really awesome is that I could invest in individual stocks and ETFs under the self-directed brokerage account. And I invested in Tesla in 2017. And I'm sure you know how much Tesla has grown over the years. And obviously, this is not in any form of personalized financial advice. Anyway, and the next question I want you to ask your employer is if they offer a Roth 401k. And there are companies that still do not offer Roth for some reason. I just think that they're just behind the times. And because if you take a look at this chart here, and having just a traditional 401k means that you're going to have taxable distributions when you start collecting your 401k at age 55 under the rule of 55. And I did a video on that a few months ago, and you can check that video out on my YouTube page. But if you don't make any 401k distributions at age 55 or 59 and a half, the IRS is going to assign you what's called a required minimum distribution, or RMD, for the traditional 401k, because the government doesn't want you to hold on to your tax deferred 401k forever. And they want you to pay your taxes at some point in your life, right? So the latest RMDs that came out, I believe, I'm going to talk about that later on, but they're between ages 70 and 75. So make sure to check out the IRS table for your required minimum distribution age. But the Roth 401k gives you tax-free distributions, and it doesn't come with the RMD like traditional 401k does, because you already pay taxes on the contributions. My contributions go to Roth because I believe my taxes will be higher in retirement, which I'll talk more about that in the next segment of this live stream. And the next question I want you to ask your employer is if they offer a match to your contribution. Having an employer match could make a huge difference to the growth of your 401k. For example, let's say your employer gives you a 100% match if you contribute 5% of your gross income. And I'm just going to call that $500 per every month, which is $6,000 a year. With a 2% annual increase in income, you would have $747,000 just in the employer contributions with a 7% average annual return. So think of it this way. If you're contributing $6,000 this year, and your employer contributes $6,000. That's $1.5 million in 30 years. And I'm going to show you the 401k calculator later on in this live stream. But if you can't wait that long, just go to firesightchat.com/resources to download your absolutely free 401k calculator. And the next question you need to ask is how long it takes to have your employer match completely vested. Okay. So let me go back to this 401k chart here. Like I said earlier, with the new 401k law in 2023, you can elect to put your employer match in either the traditional or Roth portion of your 401k. But you have to keep in mind that if you've only been with your employer for less than 3 years, which is the pretty generic rule for most 401k employers, your total balance of your 401k isn't necessarily all yours just yet. So, for example, if you had $50,000 total in your 401k, of that $50,000, $40,000 is your personal contribution and $10,000 is your employer contribution. That $10,000 is not completely yours until you work with the employer for at least a certain amount of time. The most common vesting schedule I've seen is right here. Okay. If you quit your job in less than a year, you don't get to keep any of the employer contribution. If you quit between 1 and 2 years with your employer, you get to keep about 50% of the employer contributions. And if you quit between years 2 and 3, you get to keep 75% of the employer contributions. And if you quit after working 3 years with your employer, then you get to keep 100% of the employer contributions. So you can't just take the company's employer match and then run off to another company. They want you to contribute your time to the employer before you can take your portion of the employer match. And the vesting schedule can be different from company to company. The broker that manages your 401k will keep the employer match in a separate pot of money. And if you log into your 401k website, it's going to tell you how much you contributed and how much your company contributed so far. So make sure to contact your HR to find out your vesting schedule if you don't know. Okay. And the next question you need to know is how often you get paid. And I know it sounds like a simple question, but how often you get paid is how frequently you get to contribute to your 401k. And if you're planning to maximize your 401k contribution like me, you should know that the maximum personal contribution limit for the year 2023 is 22,500 if you're under the age of 50. And if you're over the age of 50, your maximum contribution limit is $30,000. Your employer contribution does not count towards your personal contributions. So if your employer contributes $5,000, that's on top of the 22,500 or $30,000 that you personally contributed. But you want to make sure that you don't over contribute to the maximum personal contribution limit, or you're going to be penalized by the IRS. And the next 5 questions are more for the investment side of the house. And one of the questions is finding out the 401k core investment options. They can be actively managed mutual funds, target date retirement funds, or passively managed mutual funds. And the next question is if the 401k comes with a self-directed brokerage option. Remember, I talked about it earlier when I got to invest in individual stocks and ETFs by just keeping 10% in the core funds and 90% in my self-directed funds. If you know your way around the stock market, this is a great option to have for your 401k. But if you don't consider yourself like an expert, then I wouldn't worry about the self-directed brokerage account until you become more familiar with the 401k itself. The next question is how often you can allocate your investments. Some 401k plans only allow you to reallocate your money once per month or twice a month. And I don't reallocate my 401k investments that much, even during the bear market, only because I'm still 23 years away from reaching 59 and a half. And if you're in your 50s or late 50s, this is very useful information to find out how often you can allocate between stocks, bonds, and cash reserves. The next question you want to ask is how much money and fees your 401k is going to charge you. And this is more of a question with the brokerage company like Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, or whoever you have your 401k with. They could charge you the management fee, which is the fee you have to pay annually to keep your 401k open. There's also the expense ratio for each mutual fund that you invest your 401k money in. And I want to explain this as simply as I can. Okay. So, for example, your 401k plan charges you what's called a plan provider fee. And that could be anywhere between 0.5% and 2%, depending on the number of people participating in your employer's 401k plan. So what that means is it could be the size of your company and how many employees you have. Okay. And my previous employer's 401k with Vanguard charged exactly 1% in management fees annually. So they charged me $1 for every $100 I have invested in the 401k. Under the 401k plan, you're most likely going to have mutual funds with stocks, bonds, and cash reserves. So if you have a mutual fund that tracks equities and another mutual fund that tracks bonds, you're going to have to pay the operating expenses for each of the mutual funds that you own. And the operating expenses depend on the type of mutual fund you buy, right? And if it's actively managed mutual funds, they could charge you anywhere between 0.5% and 2% in the annual expense ratio. And if you buy an index fund, then it's pretty dirt cheap. And that's like anywhere between 0.04% and 0.25%. And after you pay your 401k plan, provider fee, and operating expenses fees with the mutual funds, your net profit is how much you make in return annually. So if you made a 10% gross return in 2023, the 401k plan charges you 1% and the mutual funds collectively charge you another 1%, then your net return would be 8%. Makes sense, right? And the next question you want to ask is how the core 401k mutual funds have performed in the last 5 years, 10 years, and since inception. I typically like a mutual fund with a 10-year track record. Your 401k core plan will likely have specific mutual funds that your employer chose for you to invest in. And you can always talk to the fund manager with the brokerage company to find out how the funds have performed in the past and how you should allocate your assets based on your age and risk tolerance. And I'm not going to tell you how to diversify your investments because everyone's financial situation is different. Nor should you ever listen to someone other than a licensed financial advisor who tells you how to invest in your 401k. But you should at least know how these 401k mutual funds have performed in the past. Okay. And 401k can be expensive with a plan, provider fee, management fees, and brokerage fees. To me, a mutual fund performing a 7% average annual return with a 2% management and operating expenses means that I'm making a 5% annual net return. If you don't know what you're doing, your 401k could grow a lot slower than what you anticipated. This is why you need to have a solid understanding of how a 401k works. And I don't expect you to become a stock market expert, but you should at least know how much they're charging you in expenses and how the mutual funds have performed in the past 5, 10, or 20 years. And if you still need help with financial education, specifically in the 401k, I encourage you to schedule a complimentary coaching session by visiting firestarchat.com/coaching. And I can't tell you what you should invest in, but I can teach you what information you need to find and how to find them.